to Behind the Caution Tape. I am your host, CrashLit, coming to you from the Surf House. It's been a busy week for USC sports. We got another busy week coming up, so let's start with the latest from football because it's been pretty busy. USC hired Wisconsin general manager Max Steinecker as its executive director of player personnel, and the coaching staff is now set. Actually, before we get into that, USC did sign on traditional National Signing Day. It doesn't really feel like it now that most guys sign early. But USC did add two freshmen, defensive end Jaden Ramos and linebacker AJ Tuatelli. So I think two good additions for the team, and I'm really excited to see how they contribute to the squad both next year and in the years to come. USC also has finalized its coaching staff. They announced that on social media a few days ago. So with Lincoln Riley as the head coach, we'll start the offensive coaches. You have offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach Luke Heward, offensive line coach Zach Hansen, assistant head coach for offense and pass game coordinator, as well as the wide receivers coach in Dennis Simmons. Anthony Jones will be coaching running backs and be the run game coordinator. And Chad Savage is the tight ends and inside receivers coach. Now on the defensive side, you have Danton Lynn as the defensive coordinator, Eric Henderson as the co-defensive coordinator, run game coordinator, and defensive line. Rob Ryan will serve as assistant head coach for defense and linebackers coach. Doug Belk will serve as the secondaries coach. Trevon Reed will serve as cornerbacks coach, and Sean Newell will serve as the coach for defensive ends. So with the staff finalized, USC did have a press conference for some of their new hires, including head coach Lincoln Riley spoke, general manager Chad Bowden spoke, Rob Ryan spoke, Chad Savage spoke, and then Trevon Reed spoke in a press conference on Wednesday. And so I think a few things I did want to talk about was actually probably heard when I was running through the staff, Luke Heward has been named the offensive coordinator, but Lincoln Riley will still be calling plays for the offense, according to reports I saw this week. So I think definitely, though, I do like that they've made Heward the offensive coordinator. It was always a question of who would be it after Josh Henson left for Purdue, and I think you kind of saw he wasn't surprised. I think he wanted to actually call the plays. We'll see, but I definitely like this trust in Luke Heward. I think he's proven he's done a really good job with the quarterbacks. He helped get Hassan Longstreet, especially after Julian Lewis was, looking to decommit out of here. So I really like this move, and I think he did a good job, and I think especially he's got Jaden Mayava familiar with this system. I think it's definitely going to be a good quarterback room, and also I'm just really excited to see what he does as the offensive coordinator, even if he isn't calling the plays. As for the press conference, I mentioned the five guys who spoke, but I think the guy who definitely stole the show was Rob Ryan. Got a chance to watch it Wednesday night, and it was definitely just really entertaining. I'm just telling stories, just comparing, and I really like what he's going to do. I think there's a great replacement. Well, I don't even want to say replacement for Matt Entz, but, I guess what I'm trying to say is just the guy who's, coming in to fill that vacancy as the assistant head coach for defense and also the linebackers coach after Matt Entz left for the head job at Fresno State. But I'm really excited about this hire of Rob Ryan. He knows his stuff, and I think he's really excited to work with guys. I loved how he really seems like excited to work with Eric Gentry, who I think could get really good this year and just really boost his draft stock. So I'm really excited to see what Rob Ryan especially does, and I think Cody Warsham actually summed it up best on Twitter, on X, when he posted, "I'll never forget." I think he said, my first press conference with Rob Ryan, I will never forget it." And pretty much I think it just basically meant you kind of got to watch it. If I'm going to actually pull it up real quick. And I think just overall it just shows that just how he just said, this is a full quote from Warsham, by the way. He said, "Experienced my first Rob Ryan press conference today. I will never forget it." And if you watch it online, which I highly encourage you to, go to the USC Athletics YouTube page and find the Rob Ryan press conference. It is worth your time. Just him talking, just walking around. He's not even I heard some people calling it unhinged, but it was both like I was both entertained, but also I really think he knows his stuff, and I'm really excited for how this defense is going to continue to thrive in year two with Danton Lynn as the defensive coordinator. And I think Lynn was a big part of why Ryan is here, considering their ties, especially they've worked together in the NFL. So I'm really, really excited for all that's to come with USC football this fall, and I'm just really excited to see how the spring ball turns out. Comes Goes, especially coming up really quickly, actually, which is kind of surprising to think. I mean, we're already in February, but here we are, I guess. On to a bit of quick news from soccer. Congrats to Maile Hayes for signing with SCU Torrense in Portugal. So big shout out to her. She was a big part of the team's success going to the Elite Eight this last season, and obviously had that big PK winner in overtime against St. Louis in the second round of the playoffs. So big congrats to Maile on that. Meanwhile, men's golf took part in finished 10th out of 14 teams in the Arizona NIT in Tucson. That was happening last week on Monday and Tuesday, hosted by Arizona. So Gavin Ariella and Jaden Dumdamaya both finished tied for second individually. Nicholas Dominguez finished tied 46, and Antonio Seifa and Jack George finished in tied 52nd. So men's golf is off for a bit. They got about a little less than a month until they will take part in the Southern Highlands Challenge in Las Vegas at the Southern Highlands Golf Course hosted by UNLV, and that'll be taking place March 2nd through 4th. So definitely looking forward for when they are back. And a big congratulations to Gavin Ariel as he takes part in the Genesis Invitational Showcase today at Torrey Pines Golf Course. Meanwhile, in the women's golf, they won the event out of 16 teams in the Therese Hessian Regional Challenge in Palos Verdes, which is hosted by Ohio State, from February 2nd through the 4th. So definitely a big event win for them. It's their fourth win this season out of 5 so far this year. Cindy Koo finished third individually. Jasmine Koo finished and tied fourth. Kathleen Parkin tied 8th. Kylie Chung and tied 15th. And Bailey Shoemaker and tied 17th. So up next for them, they will take part in the Alice and John Wallace Classic in Palm Desert, hosted by Long Beach State at the Monterey Country Club from February 15th through 17th. So they're back in action in just a few days. Track and field, meanwhile, went to the New Mexico Collegiate Classic last weekend on Friday, Saturday in Albuquerque, hosted by UNM, and won 6 events there. Up next for them is the Tiger Paw Invitational, hosted by Clemson on this weekend, so on Friday, Saturday. So track and field really getting after it, and as this indoor season keeps going. Meanwhile, some news from tennis. We'll start with men's. Both teams have been off. Both men's and women's have been off, but they get back in action this week. Men's tennis is currently sitting at 4-3. They go to Pepperdine on Friday, who is 5-3. Time still yet to be determined. It's going to be a good dual matchup, I think, for USC to help keep momentum going from their win against UNLV last weekend, before just getting to some tougher matchups with Big Ten play looming. So best of luck to them at Pepperdine. Women's tennis, 3-1 on the year, hosts San Diego on Friday. Toreros are 4-4. That dual matchup will start at noon, and I think this is going to be another good one for USC to just get things rolling, especially as I sort of just said, just, tougher matchups and Big Ten play coming up. So best of luck to them. And now college baseball starts this weekend. I'm really excited for it. And USC baseball is back. So opening weekend starting Friday, USC will host George Washington at Great Park in Irvine. This will be the second and final year off campus for the team due to the construction at Dado Field. So I think they're set to soon be resume practicing. Once the field's ready, they'll be able to practice on campus, but games will be off campus for one more year. So they'll take on George Washington. Games will be Friday at 6:30, Saturday at 2, Sunday at 1. So I'm really excited to just see how this first, and then before I get to that, so there's all home games, so they're at Great Park and LMU. Those will be the 2 sites. Will be free and open to the public this year. So 5 of the 6 weeknight games are at LMU, and all the weekend series as well as 1 home weeknight game are at Great Park. So most games will be at Great Park, but a few at LMU on the weeknights. But I'm definitely interested to see how this first year in the Big Ten goes, and I'm excited to see how the pitching is going to look different, just with new pitching coach with Sean Allen now in there, and just how the team is just going to be better battle tested, hopefully, just having a year of, extreme road travel, having to go off campus for all their games. Obviously, being home for practice is going to be huge for them, but definitely there will be some more travel too with, Big Ten games now on the road being further from campus because due to the Big Ten just, being in the Midwest. But overall, really excited for college baseball to be back. And I'm just really excited I think this could be a really big year for the team. And I think it's definitely one that I think will definitely could be a really fun year, just especially if, they start the season off with three big wins. So I think it's just going to be a really fun season. Now I'll move on to men's basketball. And before we get into the results, I'm going to note that Desmond Claude, arguably USC's best player this season, was out for both games after getting injured against Michigan State, but he was able to play through it against the Spartans last weekend, a couple weekends back, but that was not the case as he was on the bench for both games and didn't really play. Didn't play. So USC lost 77 to 75 at Northwestern on last Tuesday and then lost 90 to 72 at number 7 Purdue. So start with the game against the Wildcats. Clark Slager, who started in place for Claude, led USC for both games, led USC with 24 points against NU. And then just out, despite scoring first, USC never had the lead again after the Wildcats took it. And just USC just kind of struggled just early and just fell down 15 early in the second half. They did manage to rally back and tie it and ended up turning into a really competitive game, but they just sunk themselves too early. And Northwestern's Nick Martinelli was able to get the game winner with a few seconds left, and then USC afterwards with a few seconds just couldn't do anything couldn't get a heave off in time before the buzzer. So it was a tough loss, definitely a winnable game, but I think this team can definitely bounce back, although they then did have a very tough game against Purdue in West Lafayette. Wesley, it's the third, led with 30 points against the Boilermakers, and Purdue just took control early and just raced ahead and never really looked back. And I didn't get a chance to watch too much of this game. I was able to watch the whole Northwestern game, but I didn't get a chance to watch this due to being at water polo. But just from looking at the scores, you could just kind of tell, just seeing how many guys were playing, that Eric Musselman was just trying to find a lineup that would work and just kept trying, but just didn't seem to be clicking. So it was definitely a frustrating game. So, but definitely, I think it just didn't really work. So USC now sits at 13-10, and they're 5-7 in Big Ten. That puts them in 10th in the Big Ten standings. And up next, USC comes back home for 2 games. They host Penn State, who is on tomorrow night at 6 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. That game, Penn State is 13-11 overall, 3-10 in Big Ten play. And then Minnesota, who's 12-12 and 4-9 in Big Ten play at 1 p.m. on Saturday on the Big Ten Network. So just USC needs to just take advantage of being back home, and just these games are going to be a little easier, but still USC needs to be careful. I thought that game against Northwestern was winnable, but you just got to be careful. These Big Ten is a gauntlet. It's just, you got to be ready for every game and just can't look ahead. So do not need a repeat. So it was obviously tough on the road, and just USC needs to take advantage of being back home, having the fans there, and the fans do need to show up for them. But still, regardless, USC needs to take advantage of being back home. And just, I think, honestly, in some ways, I know I said this a lot for the women's volleyball team last semester. I'm going to bring it back right now. They just need to play angry. Like, you had a couple tough losses. You just need to come out there and just take care of business. Just play just with a total chip on your shoulder. In some ways, I was talking to someone about this actually on Saturday. Just, I feel like sometimes in some ways, and I'm not trying to, obviously, I'm never telling any team to like intentionally lose, so you got a chip on your shoulder. But in some ways, a loss like that I think can kind of help, because it puts that chip on your shoulder, and then you're just kind of just like, how do I respond from this? So I think USC just needs to really come out and be angry this week against both Penn State and Minnesota. We'll now move on to swim and dive. I was at the final dual meet for the men's team, the number 16 team in the nation. They beat UNLV, winning all 14 events. There's no diving, so no 2 diving events factored in the score. They won 159-94. And now both them and the women's team will look to Big Ten championships. So the women's team resumes action on from February 19th through the 22nd in the Big Ten Championships in Columbus. And on the men's side, the Big Ten Championships take place from February 26th through March 1st in Minneapolis. So both teams will head into the Big Ten Championships with 3-2 dual records. So best luck to both of them. We will bring you coverage on that as they approach. On to women's water polo. They moved into the number one spot after the win against UCLA last weekend and kept it rolling. They are now at 10-0 on the year with two more home wins. So they beat Biola on Friday 24-7 and then beat number 6 UCI 19-15 on Saturday. So against Biola, Emily Osmus led with 8 goals. And then against UCI, Osmus and Tilly Kearns each had 6 goals to lead against the Anteaters. So really, Biola was kind of a blowout from the start, very non-competitive, but definitely just it was fun to be back at the pool for this team. They're really fun to watch, and I unfortunately didn't get a chance last year. So this was my first women's water polo game in a couple of years, but it was really exciting to be back, and I'm definitely gonna try to make it to a few more throughout the school year. But UCI definitely, and I didn't make that one, gave USC more of a fight, and I think it's a good fight, good game for them to have. Just helps battle test them with tough matchups coming up, especially not this weekend, but the following weekend, and also just MPSF play, just conference play in the MPSF looming. So up next for this team, they got one more home game before going back on the road. They face Long Beach State this Saturday at 1 p.m. You can watch it on overnight.com. That's overnight, just without an I. Go to that website. You should be able to find it. And it'll be a good test, I think, for this team before the Barbara Calbus Invitational in Irvine. So women's lacrosse had of the so women's lacrosse now had a tough game at Stanford. It's a Coliseum, but before we get into that, they started the season pre-ranked at 22nd, and they had their 3 Big Ten preseason players to watch were Catherine Lord, Maddie Dora, and Isabel Vitale, and they pulled 6 out of 9 Big Ten teams. On to the result now. They were 22. They fell 18-6, number 20 Stanford at the Coliseum on Saturday. Maddie Dora led all Trojans with 3 goals, but USC did unfortunately just get hammered by the Stanford offensive attack, committed too many turnovers. They're up to number 24 in the IWLCA coaches poll for this week. So it was definitely cool to be at the Coliseum. Got to see some people I knew, including USC lacrosse alum Katie Ramsey. So it was definitely cool to chat with her, kind of learn a bit about the game during it. So I was, I think, kind of cool. It's definitely, obviously, it's always cool seeing people I know at games, especially like alums. Like I saw USC football alum and current Rams offensive lineman Justin Dedich at water polo since his girlfriend is Tilly Kearns and she's on the team right now. And then also USC water polo alum Caroline Stern was also there to support. So now I'm getting a little off topic with lacrosse, but just always cool to see like alums just coming back to support their alma mater. It's always cool. But anyways, back to lacrosse real quick. So up next, they got 2 games in Berkeley. They face Cal, who's 1-0 on Friday at 3 p.m. on ESPN Plus, and then they face Colorado, who has still not played their first game, on Sunday at 1 p.m. So TV still TBD, according to the websites of both schools. USC does need to bounce back on the road this weekend and win these two games and just definitely get going on the right track. I think this team can do a lot, but it sounds like they did lose a lot of veteran talent last year. And while I think they still can have a great year, it's definitely they're gonna need a lot of players to step up and deliver big. But that's definitely, and then also they have one more year of split home games between Coliseum, one more in the Coliseum against Johns Hopkins in about a month, and then the rest of their home games will be at Dignity Health Sports Park in Carson. So just want to bring that. So home locations will vary throughout the year. I will keep you posted on all that as they approach. Men's volleyball, meanwhile, moved up to number 5 after dominant week in Ohio, and then they swept Dominican in 3 sets on Saturday in the upstairs Galen Center Pavilion, and that'll be the final game upstairs. All the remaining games will be in the main Galen facility. So, in case anyone was wondering why it was not on the traditional Galen Center floor, I suspect it probably due to the fact they were wanting to just have everything really ready for the women's basketball game later that night, which I will get into next. But on to men's volleyball. Dylan Kleinwood with 9 kills against the Chargers, but just only played one set, which is really impressive. They just racked up 9 kills, 10 on 10 attempts, no errors, and just had hit 900. I remember I was looking at it with people I was sitting next to, and I was just like, wow, this is crazy. But you just see how key of a player Klein is to this team. And then obviously head coach Jeff Nygaard letting a lot of the younger guys and just second stringers get to play, which I think is really smart in this, which I kind of deemed as like the final tune-up game this team really has before they had some tougher, a couple more tough non-conference games, and then MPSF play full steam ahead. So it's about to get real, folks. I think this team is going to be really good, but they got to come ready because they're going to have a gauntlet for the like pretty much the remainder of the season. And they held steady at number 5 in this week's AVCA poll. But that leads us to biggest test so far, a home and home with number 2 and undefeated UC Irvine. Anteaters are 8-0 on the year. So they are home and home. So Wednesday night at 6 p.m., USC heads down to the Brent Event Center in Irvine to take on the Anteaters there. The game will be shown on ESPN Plus. And then on Friday, UCI makes the return trip up to Galen. Game will be at 7 p.m., shown on Big Ten Plus. So 2 really big games for the matches for the Trojans this week. And it's going to be their biggest test, especially, as I said, UCI being undefeated and number 2 in the nation. And head coach David Niffen, has done a great job there. He's been there a long time. He's an alum. His teams are always very good. I just remember like when I played club volleyball at Balboa Bay when I was in middle school, we actually got to go watch one of their practices. So it's really cool. And you just see how just he's got his guys always competing hard. And like I was coached by some of those guys even while they were in college. So they just produce really good players year in and year out. So you know that's just going to be a great two matchups. Finally, we will talk about women's basketball, who got 2 wins after the tough loss against Iowa in Iowa City last week, a couple weekends back. They won 86-64 at Wisconsin on Wednesday. And then Saturday night got a statement 84-63 win over then number 8 Ohio State. And USC was number 7 all last week. Kiki Iriafen led with 15 points against the Badgers, and USC was in control pretty much the entire time and cruised to an easy win against Wisconsin. It was definitely just great to just see them just respond from that tough loss against the Hawkeyes and just stay angry, play angry. Like I've said, like in some ways you just come out angry from that, and I think they did a really good job responding to that loss against the Badgers. And then they followed it up with the dub against the Buckeyes. Iriafen led with 24 points against the Buckeyes, which was, I think, pretty key because OSU started out strong, and Juju Watkins had a tough game, struggled with their shooting from the field on Saturday. I read Gottlieb said in the press conference was they didn't have this team that they have now. They probably wouldn't have been able to win that game, especially if Juju has a game where she's off. And I mean, that's, I think, the beauty of, having players like Kiki Iriafen step up. You had Kendi Smith step up, and a big congrats to her for earning her first career double-double in college. So she's been really big, especially after she came back from injury back in, I think it was, she came back from after she was out for about a month after being injured from like late November for about a month and from November to December. So she's back now and she's rocking. So this team's pretty unstoppable when everyone does their part. And you knew Ohio State was going to really target Juju because, as I said last week, they were out for blood on her after how she made her collegiate debut against them in Vegas. So you just knew they were going to, come after her. But I think USC behind Kiki Iriafen just walloped them for a statement win. Needed that one after the Iowa loss, and just I don't mean this as like any sort of criticism, and I'm not saying it can't, but it's just losses that just happen sometimes, and just the Big Ten is absolutely stacked this year, especially on the women's side. So I know I said it was a gauntlet on the men's side, but I think I mean that even more on the women's side. And you just look at how many teams are ranked for the conference. It's just it's just really insane. And just, it's so talented. You just have so many teams in the AP poll. So you just have these really tough matchups night in and night out. And it's hard to just run the table in conference play. I mean, really, and right now there's only one undefeated team left in the country, and it's UCLA. Before I get into that, so it's another cool game. Obviously, a lot of people showed up. The rowing USC rowing team was there, and I ended up getting connected and chatting with them and Coach Kelsey Shadoin during the during the game at halftime. Due to I met them at Rock and Riley's the night before, and ended up just chatting with them, and we just ended up staying in touch. So I was able to go chat with all of them, and it was really cool just during halftime. And one other thing I want to talk about before I get into previewing next week's games is just I'm gonna give a big shout out. I think Avery Howe has really impressed me this year. She's obviously just such a sharp shooter off the bench, nailing threes from downtown. But I think it really comes down to every time I get into Galen, right when they open the doors, about 90 minutes before tip off, she's usually the only one out there before the rest of the team gets there. Is just working on her shot, working on her jumper, just working on her game. And I really respect that about her, that she's just always out there on the grind. So on to the news and the previews. So USC moved up one to number 6 in this week's AP poll. They now sit at 21-2 overall, 11-1 in Big Ten play. So they're alone in second place behind UCLA, just half a game down, one game in the loss column. And up next, they got two big matchups this week. They got number 1 UCLA, who is 23-0 overall, 11-0 on Thursday night at 7 p.m. That game will be on Peacock. Not sure why they chose to do it on Peacock. Like, come on. Like, that's actually kind of lame. Like, why put that game on national TV? It belongs there because this is probably the biggest, maybe might just be the biggest game in all of LA like this season. Like, don't even think I'm exaggerating. Just the hype around it. You have the number 1 team versus the number 6 team in the country. Both really good teams. They'll be on blow for blow. It's going to be such a great game. It's already sold out. Students, make sure you're lining up early. As soon as you're out of class, get to Galen. It's going to be like, you'll be lucky to get in. It's going to be just crazy line. Just so make sure you're there. It's going to be a great game. Like my parents are coming to this one and they are really excited. USC also does play at Washington on Sunday. That game will be on at 4 p.m. Viewable on Big Ten Network. Washington is 14-10 overall, 5-7 in Big Ten. So I think after UCLA, USC will need to refocus and can't let Thursday's result, whether it's a win or a loss, distract them from the job at hand against the Huskies. But really, come on, we need to all be there at that game. We need to show the Bruins who runs this town. It's fight on, 4's down. We know it. They know it. We just got to go out there and prove it. So definitely make sure you are there. I'm going to be there. It's definitely the game I've got like most circled as like that I'm most looking forward to going to this week. So we need to show the Bruins who runs the town. You all know my answer. Fight on, 4's down. But finally, before we go, talk about how I did last week. I went 4-1 at the events I went to. So I got the swim win against UNLV and women's water polo win against Maile on Friday. And then men's volleyball won against Dominican on Saturday. Lacrosse lost against Stanford, and then women's basketball won against Ohio State. So that puts me at 59-16 overall in the year and 271-98 all time. Really trying to avoid that 100 mark. Come on, let's not get me there, please. Trying to not have 100 losses. Not going to be proud of that milestone. But overall, so far on the year, I'm 10-5 at men's basketball, 10-1 at 11-1 at women's basketball, 6-0 at men's volleyball, 1-0 at men's swim, and then 0-1 at lax. So my plans for this week are going to be men's basketball versus Penn State tomorrow night. I'm going to go to Irvine for the away UCI game on Wednesday night. Obviously, the Crosstown Showdown. Be there. Like, I don't know how many more times I need to say it, but I'm going to keep hyping this thing up, especially with just how this probably is the most fun team to watch on campus right now. It's currently going. And plus, you got the face of the school in Juju Watkins, who's going to definitely go off. And she's going to be fired up for this game, too. So that'll be Thursday. And then I'm going to baseball on Friday night against George Washington. I'll do men's basketball against Minnesota on Saturday, and then baseball again against George Washington to close the series on Sunday. And then depending on how things shake out, I may go to the women's tennis game match against USD on Friday. But that's all we got for you today on Behind the Caution Tape. Thank you again for everyone who's been joining in, and thank you everyone who's been supporting me, It means the world to me that you've been subscribing, watching, listening to this podcast. It's a lot of fun. Definitely looking forward to getting some more people on soon. Got some stuff in the works. Nothing confirmed, so I'm not going to announce anything yet. But definitely make sure to follow me on social media everywhere at CrashLit, Instagram, X, YouTube, just everywhere. It's pretty much my username everywhere. So just make sure to follow me there. Make sure to check out my website, crashlit.com. We'll see you all at the games. Make sure to come say hi to me. Let's chat it up. And obviously, I'm going to say this one more time. Be at UCLA, be at Galen on Thursday night for that UCLA game. Probably the biggest game of the year, biggest event in LA this year. So definitely make sure you're part of it. It's going to be so much fun. Going to be a great game. You know, it's going to go blow for blow, and it's going to be just such a fun matchup. So fight on, fours down. Make sure to pull up this week. I'll see y'all next week and fight on.